Boker Tov, everyone. It's time for Taste of Torah. And this week we're going to offer a slightly shorter than usual presentation because we've also got Purim going on. And I hope you'll take time to look at both our Purim spiel on Zoom, but also our little description, our narrative of Purim, which is also on Zoom. So there's a lot to view this week. So this week's portion is Tetzaveh, and it follows logically upon last week's Truma, because in last week's we got an essential description of the paradigm of how to build the portable sanctuary, the Mishkan, which the Israelites would take them with them through the wilderness and would keep and sustain them all the way to the time of King Solomon, when Solomon would finally build a permanent sanctuary to God. But I just want to focus on one little aspect, and that is the opening verses of this portion. Now, what happens in our Torah portion in general is it goes on to finish the description of what's going on into the Mishkan, and then go on to a equally detailed description of what is happening with the priesthood. And it goes into priestly garments, and we could do a great discussion about uniforms and things like that, but we're not going to. Instead, I want to quote this passage to you. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain, which is over the ark of the pact, that is the ark of the covenant, to burn from evening and morning before the eternal. It shall be a due from the Israelites for all times throughout the ages. In other words, the Israelites have to provide the resources to keep this lamp burning. For those of you who may not recognize it, this is the inspiration for the synagogue Ner Tamid. Now, in the biblical context, Ner Tamid, which appears in the verses I just read to you, means regular light or constant light, in the sense that it should always be burning. We now translate it somewhat differently. We translate it as eternal light. And the mode has changed. In the Mishkan, it would have been the menorah that provided the constant light. So there would have been 7 individual lamps burning. Now, what we've done is we've set aside the use of the traditional menorah in favor of the one symbolic light that sits before the Ark of the Covenant. Now, I should say that this light has wandered around a little bit in our history. There was a time, apparently, when that light was put on the western wall rather than over the Ark, to point in the direction of Jerusalem, which was a useful geographic reference point for those who were in synagogues in Eastern lands. But eventually it found its way to its preeminent position before the Ark, and it has burned there ever since. Now, it is interesting that it is pretty much the last detail that appears about the construction of the portable sanctuary. So in a sense, light is the culmination of the project. More than that, it seems to be here, it is drawing a distinction between a light which simply burns for utilitarian purposes to illuminate a dark space, and instead is now a light dedicated to a sacred purpose. Now, a few weeks ago, I did talk to you about the difference between enlightenment and light, that the rabbis distinguish 2 kinds of light. A light that is visible light that we use in our lives every day, but also a kind of light that is spiritual, and that would be enlightenment. Here too, we see the beginning of another Jewish tradition, which is that there are 2 kinds of visible light. And that is visible light, which is utilitarian, as we were describing, but also the idea that we could kindle and have sacred lights, lights dedicated only for their aesthetic and inspirational purpose. The Ner Tamid is one example. The Chanukiah, the lighting of the Hanukkah menorah, is another. Of course, famously, that ninth candle, the Shamas candle, is given to us to serve a practical purpose, because we're not supposed to use any of the other 8 candles for practical uses at all. We're just supposed to appreciate them, admire them, and study them. And I think it's interesting to think about this. And it brings us back to the theme I talked about a few weeks ago, which was the powerful symbolism of light. So in terms of sacred light, maybe the best thing to reference is a wonderful little midrash. I'm sure you've heard it at some point in your life, in Shmot Rabbah, in Exodus Rabbah, that comments on the verse, why does the proverb say, for the mitzvah is a light? Why do we associate light with sacred obligation? And the answer the midrash gives is it's like a lamp. What's special about a lamplight? Well, you can kindle any number of other lamps or lights off of a single lamp, a single candle, a single source, and you can create much more light without diminishing the original light at all. And that's fairly unique, because everything else, as soon as we start divvying it up, whatever was the source gets diminished, but not light. And that may be, in fact, the inspiration for the notion of enlightenment, the idea that there is a kind of value that we have, the object that we hold that seems priceless, but it can still be given away and we don't lose anything from it. And I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about the light of Torah, is that we are not at all diminished by sharing Torah and sharing its wisdom, whether it be with our family, with our community, with non-Jews, with each other in every kind of way. It is a product that only multiplies, never shrinks. And so I think that's a great way of thinking about the Ner Tamid. It is meant to remind us that the sacred light of Torah, that the upper lights of Judaism are enduring and they stay with us. And that if we learn the wisdom of Torah, it's not lost. And if we share it with someone else, if we become not a learner, but a teacher, in fact, we probably enhance our own light along the way. So that's the Ner Tamid. And it's my hope that you have a little bit of that Jewish light, what in Yiddish would be called the Pintel Yid, inside of you that burns eternally. Turn to that light, look to it, take inspiration from it, and share it. Do a little Jewish something for someone around you, and spread the light around. All right, I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to being able to learn with you some more very, very soon.